Mr. President, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
It's great to be with you.
It's been a while.
Better late than never.
You're trying to pressure Senate Republicans to consider Judge Garland. But Senate Republicans, the GOP, is applying pressure of its own. And just this week, two Senate Republicans, Moran and Murkowski, reversed themselves and said they no longer support even holding confirmation hearings. So far, there has not been a break in Republican ranks.
Well, I think that things will evolve as people get familiar with Judge Garland's record, as it becomes apparent that the overwhelming majority of the American people think that the president nominates somebody to the Supreme Court, and the Senate should now do its constitutional job and give him a hearing. And originally, the Republicans said they wouldn't meet with him at all. Now a number of them have already had meetings. And the questioning that they're having privately with Judge Garland is something that should be done publicly through a hearings process so the American people can make their own assessment. But I recognize there's pressure on the other side. Our goal is just to make sure that the Senate does its job and treats him fairly.
Now, you talk about the Senate doing its job. You're calling for an up or down vote on Judge Garland. But back in 2006, Senator Barack Obama joined a filibuster on Sam Alito, a Bush appointee, which would have prevented an up or down vote. Isn't there a fair amount of hypocrisy on both sides, frankly, including you?
I think there's no doubt that Democrats and Republicans have gotten into a fix inside the Senate in which the confirmation process becomes too much of a tit for tat or becomes politicized. I will point out, though, Chris, that never has a Republican president's nominee not received a hearing, not received a vote. So I don't object to Republicans saying, look, Merrick Garland may be a fine man, he may be an excellent judge, but I just disagree with him philosophically on a whole range of issues, so I'm going to vote against him.
So you'd be okay if he got defeated as long as they go through the process?
I think that if they go through the process, they won't have a rationale to defeat him. So my point is, go through the process, go through the hearings. I think if you do that, the American people and the majority of senators will determine that, in fact, he is qualified to be on the court.
Some Republican senators say, look, if a Democrat wins in November, well, maybe we'll consider Garland in a lame duck hearing. Yeah. Have you made a commitment to Garland that you're going to stick by him through the end of your term? Or perhaps, let's say Hillary Clinton is the newly elected president, would you pull him and let her make the pick?
As more senators meet with him, I think they will recognize the qualities of this individual. What I think we can't have is a situation in which the Republican Senate simply says, because it's a Democratic president, we are not going to do our job, have hearings, and have a vote.
But
because if that happens, Chris, then it is almost impossible to expect that the Democrats, let's say a Republican president won, that the Democrats wouldn't say the exact same thing. They'll say, let's wait for 4 years. And we'll take our chances on the next president.
But just to button this up, Are you saying you will stick with Merrick Garland through the end of your term?
Yes.
No pulling him after?
Absolutely not.
I want to ask you about an interview, an extensive interview you did with the Atlantic magazine recently. It says that you think that the fear of terrorism among politicians, among the press, among the public is exaggerated. And then the article goes on to say, quote, Obama frequently reminds his staff that terrorism takes far fewer lives in America than handguns, car accidents, and falls in bathtubs do. Do we make too big a deal of the terror threat?
I don't think we make too big of a deal of the terror threat. My number one job is to protect the American people. My number one priority right now is defeating ISIL. My number one priority throughout my presidency has been going after terrorist networks that would attempt to do harm to Americans inside or outside of America. My point is that how we do it is important. That we have to make sure that we abide by our laws. We have to make sure that we abide by our values. And we have to make sure that what we do doesn't end up being counterproductive. So when I hear some candidates saying we should carpet bomb innocent civilians.
Ted Cruz.
That is not a productive approach to defeating terrorism. When I hear people suggesting that we should ban all Muslims from entering the country, that is not a good approach to defeating terrorism. Our approach has to be smart.
But the pushback against this, and when you say more people die in bathtub accidents, and I understand you're not saying it's unimportant, but you're saying we can't overreact to it, is bathtub manufacturers aren't trying to kill us and they're not trying to up the body count. I think it's fair to say that some of the sharpest criticism of you from both sides during your presidency has been the way that you've responded personally, not necessarily in policy, to terror attacks. After James Foley's beheaded, you went out and played golf. After Paris, you said it was a setback.
Even as we grieve with our French friends, however, we can't lose sight that there has been progress being made.
After San Bernardino, you talked about gun control.
Right now, people on the no-fly list can walk into a store and buy a gun. That's insane.
And some people wonder, I think the concern is, do you worry about terrorism and feel the threat of terrorism the way they do?
And I would say this, there isn't a president who's taken more terrorists off the field than me over the last 7.5 years. I'm the guy who calls the families or meets with them or hugs them or tries to comfort a mom or a dad or a husband or a kid after a terrorist attack. So let's be very clear about how much I prioritize this. This is my #1 job,
So why is it
and
that
we have been doing it effectively.
But so why do people sometimes think you're diffident
Well,
about it?
I think part of it is that in the wake of terrorist attacks, it has been my view consistently that the job of the terrorists in their minds is to induce panic, induce fear, get societies to change who they are. And what I've tried to communicate is you can't change us. You can kill some of us, but we will hunt you down and we will get you. And in the meantime, just as we did in Boston after the marathon bombing, we're going to go to a ball game and do all the other things that make our life worthwhile, and you have nothing to offer. That's the message of resilience, that we don't panic, that we don't fear, we will hunt you down and we will get you.
Last October, you said that Hillary Clinton's private email server did not jeopardize national secrets.
I can tell you that this is not a situation in which America's national security was endangered.
Since then, we've learned that over 2,000 of her emails contained classified material. 22 of the emails had top secret information. Can you still say flatly that she did not jeopardize America's secrets?
I've got to be careful because, as you know, there have been investigations, there are hearings, Congress is looking at this, and I haven't been sorting through each and every aspect of this. Here's what I know. Hillary Clinton was an outstanding Secretary of State. She would never intentionally put America in any kind of jeopardy. And what I also know, because I handle a lot of classified information, is that there's classified and then there's classified. There's stuff that is really top secret, and there's stuff that is being presented to the President or the Secretary of State that you might not want on the transom or going out over the wire, but is basically stuff that you could get in open source.
But last October, you were prepared to say she hadn't jeopardized, and the question is, can you still say that?
I continue to believe that she has not jeopardized America's national security. Now, what I've also said is that, and she's acknowledged, that there's a carelessness in terms of managing emails that she has owned and she recognizes. But I also think it is important to keep this in perspective. This is somebody who has served her country for 4 years as Secretary of State and did an outstanding job, and no one has suggested that in some ways, as a consequence of how she handled emails, that detracted from her excellent ability to carry out her duties.
Mr. President, when you say what you've just said. When Josh Earnest said, as he did, your spokesman, in January, the information from the Justice Department is she's not a target. Some people, I think, are worried whether or not the decision, whether or not how to handle the case, will be made on political grounds, not legal grounds. Can you guarantee to the American people, can you direct the Justice Department to say Hillary Clinton will be treated as the evidence goes, she will not be in any way protected?
I can guarantee that. And I can guarantee that not because I give Attorney General Lynch a directive. That is institutionally how we have always operated. I do not talk to the Attorney General about pending investigations. I do not talk to FBI directors about pending investigations. We have a strict line and always have maintained it, previous presidents.
Just to button this up.
I guarantee it.
You
I guarantee that there is no political influence in any investigation conducted by the Justice Department or the FBI, not just in this case, but in any case.
And she will be
full stop, period.
And she will be treated no differently?
Guaranteed, full stop. Nobody gets treated differently when it comes to the Justice Department because nobody is above the law.
Even if she ends up as the Democratic nominee?
How many times do I have to say it, Chris? Guaranteed.
Finally, we've seen in this campaign, I think both among some Trump voters and among some Sanders voters, anger about Washington, about Wall Street. Do you feel any personal responsibility that 8 years after you came into office, there are millions of people out there who still feel cut out from the decisions that affect their lives?
Well, there's no doubt that I feel frustrated about it. My whole operating assumption in terms of our democracy is the more people are involved, the more they know, the more they're involved, the more responsive our government is.
So why are there all these people, Democrats and Republicans?
I think it comes out of a couple things, Chris. Number one, we're still shell-shocked from what happened in 2007, 2008. We've now had more than 6 years straight of job growth and cut the unemployment rate down to 5%. But people lost homes, lost jobs, lost life savings, and they still don't fully know how that happened and was the system fixed in a way they can have confidence in.
How couldn't you have fixed that in 8 years?
Well, actually, we've done a better job than I think most people give us credit for.
I don't mean fixed the system, I mean fixed the perception.
Well, the perception is going to be changing over time as people see results, as they get more confident. But, and this is the big but, nobody's going to be 100% satisfied in a democracy like ours with every outcome. And I think the danger, both among Republicans and among Democrats, who increasingly just listen to each other, or they just listen to people who already agree with them. Republicans, they have their own TV stations,
Go ahead,
their own
you can
radios.
say Fox News.
They've got their own publications, their own blogs. Democrats, same thing. Increasingly what happens is we don't hear each other. And so what happens then is when Republicans promise to repeal Obamacare and it doesn't get repealed, they're outraged. Well, it must be because Republicans were corrupt or unresponsive or big money got involved. If Democrats get frustrated, they say, well, why didn't we have a public option in our health care system or have a single payer system? Well, it turns out that 85% of people get health care through their jobs. They're pretty satisfied with it. They don't want big change on that. That's why it didn't happen. It wasn't necessarily because there was some corruption or venality or that people were unresponsive to democracy. People disagree. I want occasionally people to step back and take a look. America's got the best cards. We are the envy of the world. We have the most powerful military on earth by a mile. Our economy right now is stronger than any other advanced economy. We have the best workers. We have the best universities. We are the most innovative. We have the most advanced scientific community. We have an incredibly diverse and talented population. This can be our century. just like the 20th century was, as long as we don't tear each other apart because our politics values sensationalism or conflict over cooperation, and we don't have the ability to compromise. And if we get that part right, nobody can stop us.
Mr. President, thank you.
I enjoyed it. Thank you so much, Chris.